Warning, personal opinion ahead, which means nothing outside of my own head. You may be offended, and you have been warned. Hello again, Internet. As I mentioned in a previous video, I am now a member of the ACLU and a member of the NRA. I have to admit the NRA freebie is a little nicer because it's this kind of gold-plated pen made out of 308 cartridges, and it's got this, I don't know if you can see it, yeah, it's got this little bolt-action rifle thing as the clip. I guess the glare is a bit too much, but oh well. Now, an important thing I need to discuss. It's primarily for you proselytizing Christians out there. Don't get me wrong. I love you to death. Well, reasonably. I love you reasonably. But I want to argue with you. I want to debate with you. I'd like to talk with you. But there's one thing you guys just can't do. And I know a lot of you will take it as a challenge. It's not intended as a challenge. It's basic information. You can't convert me back to Christianity. I'm an ex-Christian. I'm a post-Christian. I was raised Christian, and although I never got into the habit of memorizing word for word large portions of the Bible, I am pretty good with my theology. My issue is this. Since leaving the faith, or that particular faith, I've come to the conclusion that the God of the Bible, the Abrahamic God, the Tetragrammaton, Yahweh, Jehova, Adonai, however you want to put it, is essentially beneath my contempt. I say this because the God of the Bible is a tyrant. Now, Jesus, pretty decent guy. Not always the nicest guy on the planet, but the Sermon on the Mount is one of the better sermons that you could possibly have. But Jesus didn't come to replace the law, merely to complete it. And as Christian tradition claims and orthodoxy supports, the Old Testament is just as much a part of the Bible as the New Testament. Now what this means is that the same God that sent his son to die on the cross is the same God who sent two she-bears to tear apart a couple score kids for making fun of a bald prophet. This is the same God of Leviticus and Deuteronomy. This is the same God who fully supported the first ancient Jewish patriarchs, who, up until Joseph, were pretty much, to a man, utter assholes. We're talking about the same God who ordered the annihilation of the Canaanites. We're talking about the same God who hardened Pharaoh's heart just so he could have an excuse to put more plagues onto the people of Egypt. This is not a sort of being I wish to worship. This is not the sort of being I wish to respect. Now, I thoroughly understand that most Christians believe in a God of love, and that's perfectly fine. It makes perfect and utter sense. The thing is that this God of love is not exactly the entity told of in the New Testament. Or not in the New Testament, in the Old Testament. And this God of love is essentially a modern syncretic, sort of wishy-washy version of the traditional Christian God. The fundamentalists, the evangelicals, and the Southern Baptists pretty much have their theology correct. If you wish to consider the Bible as a revealed word. Once you start moving away from that, it becomes less the rule to live by and more a set of guidelines and more a couple of moral fables and then just a series of fairy tales. This is not meant to belittle moderate Christians. What I'm saying is that moderate Christians have essentially developed their own personal or semi-personal conceptualization of God, which is inspired by, but not actually the same thing as the Abrahamic God, by description. I took a long, hard look at this, and the concept of a being who first creates paradise, creates mankind in a state of perfection, and then sets up a landmines to kick him out of perfection. Sets up man for sin. And sin, and sin, and sin. And the only way to wash away that sin is for this God to sacrifice his own son, who happens to be himself, to make up for an original sin he himself first intended and and divined. That is psychotic. There's, we cannot understand the purposes of God, but there's a limitation to that. There's a limitation. You can't say that God is all good, and then somehow come to some sort of twisty, curvy-turvy explanation as to why evil exists in the universe. God made it that way. In human terms, which are, God has to be, to some small extent, evil, or at least responsible for it. And it makes more sense to say that God might be even just a little smidge evil than to say that, it's completely good and evil isn't his fault. So, and it's perfectly, it's perfectly easy for the Abrahamic God to commit evil, because in the Bible he does it every other page. And this is why you can't convert me. I've read this thing, I've thought it over, I have rejected it in the full foreknowledge that should I be wrong and the Bible right, I am going to hell. I accept that fate. Okay? I'm fine with that. Because if the Bible is absolutely true, even metaphorically, if the Bible is a true statement of God's being, then God is a tyrant who deserves nothing but the detestation and opposition of others. That's just my opinion. Other people who have a different conceptualization of this, okay, but I still thoroughly disagree. That's fine. And I fully know, at this point, it's essentially better to be a prince in hell than a slave in heaven to a God like that. Given the absolute brutality, inhumanity, and genocidal psychosis of the Old Testament God, and after rereading the Old Testament again recently, I've decided to go with General Chang, and that you have not read the Old Testament until you have read it in the original Klingon.